제인이에요. 오늘은 해리포터 3권을 시작하는 날입니다. 해리포터 3권 Prisoner of Azkaban 챕터 1 읽어보도록 할게요. 냐옹! Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. 오늘은 챕터 1의 Owl Post 읽어보도록 할 텐데요. 시작할게요. Chapter 1 Owl Post. Harry Potter was a highly unusual boy of many ways. For one thing, he hated the summer holidays more than any other time in year. For another, he really wanted to do his homework, but was forced to do it in secret in the dead of night. And he also happened to be a wizard. It was nearly midnight, and he was lying on his throne in bed. Blankets drawn might have been his head like a tent, and torch in one hand on a large leather-bound book, A History of Magic by a Bella method, dropped open against the pillow. Harry moved the tip of his eagle feather quill down the page, frowning as he looked for something to have to write his essay, which earning in 14th century was completely pointless to his quest. The quill holes at the top of the likely-looking paragraph. Harry pushed his round glasses up a nose, moved his torch close to the book, and read. Non-magic people, more commonly known as muggles, were particularly afraid of magic in medieval times, not very good at recognizing it. On the rare occasion that they did catch a real witch or wizard, burning had no effect on whatsoever. The witch or wizard would put up a noisy flame-breathing charm and then pretend to shriek with pain, while enjoying a gentle tickling sensation. Indeed, Gwendolyn the Weird enjoyed being there so much that she all of herself called a few of them 47 times in various disguises. Harry put his quill between his teeth and reached underneath the pillow with a spring bottle on the lily parched. Slowly and very carefully, he unscrewed the ink bottle, dipped his quill into it, and began to write, pausing every now and then to listen, because if any of the Dursleys had the scratching of his quill on their way to the bathroom, he'd probably find himself locked in the cupboard under the stairs for the rest of the summer. The Dursley family had number 4 Privet Drive, was the reason that Harry had never enjoyed in summer holidays. Uncle Vernon, Aunt Petunia, and their son Dudley was Harry's only living relatives. They were muggles, and they had a very medieval attitude to magic. Harry's dead parents, who had been a witch and wizard themselves, were never mentioned under the Dursleys' roof. For years, Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon had hoped that if they kept Harry as downtrodden as possible, they would be able to squash the magic out of him. To their theory, they had been unsuccessful, and now lived in terror of anyone finding out that Harry had spent most of the last 2 years at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The most Dursleys could do these days was to lock away Harry's spellbooks, wand, cauldron, and broomsticks at the start of the summer holidays, and forbid him to talk to the neighbors. These separations of his spellbooks had been a real problem to Harry, because his teachers at Hogwarts had given him a lot of holiday work. One of the essays, particularly lasting one about the drinking potions, was to Harry's least favorite teacher, Professor Snape, who would be delighted to have an excuse to give Harry detention for a month. Harry would therefore seize his chance in the first week of the holidays. Whilst Uncle Vernon, Aunt Petunia, and Dudley had gone into the front garden to admire Uncle Vernon's new company car in very loud voices so that the rest of the street would notice it too, Harry had crept downstairs, picked the lock on the cover under the stairs, grabbed some books, and hidden them in his bedroom. As long as it didn't stop his ink on the sheets, the Dursleys would never know to be studying magic by night. Harry was keen to avoid trouble with his aunt and uncle at the moment, as they were already in a bad mood at him, all because he received a telephone call of a fellow wizard 1 week into the school holidays. Ron Weasley, who was one of Harry's best friends at Hogwarts, came for a whole family of wizards. This meant that he knew a lot of things Harry didn't, but had never used a telephone before. Most unlikely, it had been Uncle Vernon who had answered the call. "Vernon Dursley speaking?" Harry, who had been in the room at the time, froze as he heard Ron's voice answer. "Hello? Hello? Hello, Harry? I want to talk to Harry Potter!" Ron was yelling so loudly that Uncle Vernon jumped and held the receiver put away from his ear, staring at it with an expression of mingled fury and alarm. "Who is this?" he roared in the direction of the mouthpiece. "Who are you?" "Ron Weasley!" Ron bellowed back, as though he and Uncle Vernon speaking from opposite ends of the football pitch. "I'm a friend of Harry's from school!" Uncle Vernon's swell eyes scribbled around to Harry, who was rooted to spot. "There is no Harry Potter here!" he roared, now holding the scene about arm's length as though frightening him by his throat. "I don't know what school you're talking about! Never contact me again! Don't you come near my family!" And he threw the receiver back onto the telephone as if dropping a poisonous feather. The row that followed had been one of the worst ever. "How dare you give this number to people like you!" Uncle Vernon had roared, spraying Harry with spit. Ron obviously realized that it got Harry into trouble, but because he hadn't called again. Harry's other best friend for Hogwarts, Hermione Granger, hadn't been in touch either. Harry suspected that Ron had warned Hermione not to call, which was a pity, because Hermione, the cleverest witch in Harry's ear, had Muggle parents, knew perfectly well how to use a telephone, and would probably had enough sense not to say that you went to Hogwarts. So Harry had no word from any of his wizarding families for 5 long weeks. And this summer was turning out to be almost as bad as the last one. There was just one very small improvement. After swearing that he wouldn't use her to send letters to any of his friends, Harry had been allowed to let his owl, Hedwig, out at night. Uncle Vernon had given in because of the racket Hagrid made was locked in cage all the time. Harry finished writing about wintering the weird and paused to listen again. The silence in the dark house was broken only by the distant, grunting snores of his enormous cousin, Dudley. It must be very late. Harry's eyes were itching with tiredness. Perhaps he'll finish his essay tomorrow night. He replaced the top of the ink bottle, pulled an old pillowcase from under his bed, put the torch and his sphere of magic, his essay, quill and ink inside it, got out of bed, and hid the lock under the wrist further under his bed. and he stood up, stretched, and checked the time on the enormous laundry on his bedside table. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. Harry's stomach gave a funny jolt. He had been 13 years old without realizing it for a whole hour. Yet another unusual thing about Harry was how little he looked forward to his birthdays. He had never received a birthday card in his life. The Dursleys kept completely ignoring his last 2 birthdays, and he had no reason to suppose they would remember this one. Harry walked across the dark room, past Harry's large entry cage to the open window. He leaned on the still, but cool night air pleasant on his face after a long time under the blankets. Hedwig had been absent for 2 nights now. Harry wasn't worried about her. She had been gone this long before, but he hoped she'd be back soon. She was the only living creature in this house who didn't flinch the sight of him. Harry had though small and skinny for his age, and grown a few inches over the last year. His straight back hair, however, was just as it always had been, stubbornly untidy, whatever he did to it. The eyes behind his glasses were bright green, and on his forehead, clearly visible through his hair, was a thin scar, shaped like a bolt of lightning. Of all the unusual thing about Harry, this scar was the most extraordinary of all. It was not, as the Dursley pretended for 10 years, a souvenir of the car crash into the killed Harry's parents, because Lily and James Potter had not died in a car crash. They had been murdered by the most feared dark wizard for 100 years, Lord Voldemort. Harry escaped from the same attack with nothing more than a scar on his forehead. When Voldemort scars, instead of killing them, Harry bounded upon it to rejuvenate it. Buried alive, Voldemort had fled. But Harry had come face to face with him since at Hogwarts, remembering their last meeting as he stood at the dark window. Harry had to admit he was lucky even to have reached his 13th birthday. He scanned the scary scar his side of Hagrid, perhaps swearing back to him with giant mouths dangling from his beak, expecting grace. Gazing absently over the rooftops, it was a few seconds before Harry realized what he was seeing. Silhouetted against the golden roof, growing larger at every moment, was a large, strangely lopsided creature, and it was sweeping in Harry's direction. He stood quite still, watching it sink lower and lower. For a split second, he hesitated. He was under the window ledge, wondering whether to slam it shut. But then the bizarre creature soared over one of the street lamps of Privet Drive, and Harry, realizing what it was, let go side. Through the window soared 3 owls, 2 of them holding up the third, which appeared to be unconscious. They landed with a soft flunk on Harry's bed, and the middle owl, which was large and grey, keeled right over and lay motionless, and a large package tied to its legs. Harry recognized his unconscious owl at once. His name was Errol, and it belonged to the Weasley family. Harry dashed back at once, untied the coat around the Errol's legs, took off the parcel, and gave Errol to Hedwig's cage. Errol opened one bleary eye, gave a feeble through the tanks, and began to gulp some water. Harry turned back to the remaining owls. One of them was a large, snowy female, was his own Hagrid. She too was carrying a parcel and looked extremely pleased herself. She gave Harry the affectionate nip with her pick as she removed her burden, then she across the room to join Errol. Harry didn't recognize the third owl, a handsome, tawny one, to do from, because in addition to the third parcel, it was carrying a letter bearing the Hogwarts crest. When Harry relieved this owl of the post, it ruffled his feather importantly, stretched his wing, and took off through the window into the night. Harry sat down on his bed, grabbed Owl's package, ripped up the brown paper, and discovered the present wrapped in gold, and his first ever birthday card. Fingers trembling slightly, he opened the envelope. 2 pieces of paper fell out, a letter and a newspaper cutting. The cutting had clearly come out of the Wizarding newspaper, the Daily Prophet, because the people in the black and white picture was moving. Harry picked up the cutting, smoothed it out, and read. Ministry of Magic employee Scoop's Grand Prize. Arthur Weasley, head of the Mysteries of Muggle Artifact Office at the Ministry of Magic, has won the annual Daily Prophet Grand Prize Grillion Draw. And delighted Mr. Weasley told the Daily Prophet, "We will be spending the gold in a summer holiday in Egypt, where our eldest son Bill works as a curse breaker from Gringotts Wizarding Bank. The Weasley family will be spending a month in Egypt, returning for the start of the new school year at Hogwarts, which 5 of the Weasley children currently attend." Harry scanned the moving photograph. The grin spread across his face as he saw all 9 of the Weasleys waving fiercely at him, standing in front of a large pyramid. Crowned little Mrs. Weasley, tall, balding Mr. Weasley, 6 sons and 1 daughter. All that the black and white picture didn't show its flaming red hair. Right in the middle of the picture was Ron, tall and gangling, with his pet rat Scabbers on his shoulder, and his arm around the little sister Ginny. Harry couldn't think of anyone deserved to win a large pile of gold more than the Weasleys, who were very nice and extremely poor. He picked up Ron's letter and unfolded it. Dear Harry, happy birthday! Look, I'm really sorry about that telephone call. I hope the Muggles didn't give you a hard time. I asked that, and I reckon I shouldn't have started. A brilliant in here in Egypt. Bill taken a ramble on the twos, and he relieved the curses all the old Egyptian legends put on them. Mom wrote a like Ginny Kim, the last one. There were all these mutant skeletons in there. Muggles had broken in and grown extra heads and stuff. I couldn't believe it when Dad won the Daily Prophet draw. 700 galleons. Most of it's gone on a holiday, but they're going to buy me a new one for next year. Harry remembered only too well the occasion when Ron's old one had snapped. It had happened when the car the 2 of them had been flying to Hogwarts had crashed into a tree in the school grounds. We'll be back about a week before term starts, and we're going to London to get my wand and my new books. Any chance of meeting you there? Don't let the Muggles get you down. Try and come to London. Ron. P.S. Percy's head boy. He got a letter last week. Harry glanced at the photograph. Percy, who was in his 7th and final year at Hogwarts, was looking particularly smug. He pinned his head boy badge to the fizz perched gently on the top of his knit hair, his horn-rimmed glasses flashing in the Egyptian sun. Harry now turned to his present and unlocked him. Inside was a looked like a miniature glass spinning top. There was another note from Ron beneath it. Harry, this is a pocket sneakerscope. If there's someone untrustworthy around, it's over to light up and spin. Bill says it's rubbish, so the wizard tourist and is reliable because it kept lighting up at dinner last night. But he didn't realize Fred and George had put beetles in his soup. Bye, Ron. Harry put the book of Snickers Book on his bedside table, where it stood quite still, balanced on its point, reflecting the luminous head on his rump. It looked at it happily for a few seconds, then picked up the parcel Hedwig brought. Inside this, too, there is a wrapped present, a card and a letter, this time from Hermione. Dear Harry, Ron will wrote to me and told me about his phone call to your Uncle Vernon. I do hope you're all right. I'm on holiday, France, to a moment, and I didn't know how I was going to send this to you. What if they opened it and distance? But then Hedwig turned up. I think she wanted to make sure you got something for your birthday for a change. I bought your present by Owl Brother, an advertisement in Daily Prophet. I've been getting it delivered. It's so good to pick up what's going on in the wizarding world. Did you see the picture of Ron and his family a week ago? I bet he's learning laws on really channels. The ancient Egyptian wizards were fascinating. There's an interesting local history of witchcraft here too. I rewritten my whole history of magic yesterday to include some of the things I found out. I worked for not too long. It's 2 rolls of parchment more than Professor Finch asked for. Ron says it's going to be in London in the last week of the holidays. Can you make it? Can you either Aunt and Nicola want to come? I really hope you can. If not, I'll see you in the Hogwarts Express on September 1st. Love from Hermione. P.S. Ron says Percy's head boy. I bet Percy's really pleased. Ron doesn't seem too happy about it. Harry laughed again as he put Hermione's letter aside and picked up her present. It was very heavy. Knowing Hermione, he was sure it could be a large book full of very difficult spells. But it wasn't. His heart gave a huge bound as he ripped back the paper and saw a sleek black leather case with silver words stamped across it. Broomstick Servicing Kit. Whoa, Hermione, Harry whispered, unzipping the case to look inside. There was a large jar of Flitwick's high-finish handle polish, a pair of gleaming silver tail twig clippers, a tiny brass compass to keep onto your broom for long journeys, and a handbook of do-it-yourself broom care. Apart from his friends, the thing that Harry missed most of the Hogwarts was Quidditch, the most popular sport in the magical world. Highly dangerous, very exciting, and played on broomsticks. Harry happened to be a very good Quidditch player. He had been the youngest person in a century to be picked for one of the Hogwarts house teams. One of Harry's most prized possessions was his Nimbus 2000 racing broom. Harry put the letter case aside and picked up his lost puzzle. He recognized the untidy scroll on the brown paper at once. This was his Hagrid, the Hogwarts gamekeeper. He tore off the top layer of paper and glanced at something green and lettery. But before he could unwrap it properly, the parcel gave a strange quiver, and the water inside it smacked loudly, as though it had jaws. Harry froze. He knew that Hagrid would never send him anything dangerous on purpose, but then Hagrid didn't have a normal potions view on what was dangerous. Hagrid had been known to befriend giant spiders, buy Mrs. Three-Headed Dolls from men in pumps, and sneak illegal dragon eggs into his cabin. Harry poked the parcel nervously. It snapped loudly again. Harry lifted the lamp on his bedside table, gripped it firmly in one hand, and raised it over his head, ready to strike. Then he seized the rest of the wrapping paper in his other hand and pulled. And out fell a book. Harry just had time to register its handsome green cover and blazoned with the golden title, The Monster Book of Monsters, before it flipped onto its edge and stuckled sideways along the bed like some weird crab. "Uh-oh," Harry muttered. The book coupled off the bed with a large clunk and shuffled rapidly across the room. Harry followed it, still stealthily, hiding in the dark space under his desk. Praying that Dursleys were still fast asleep, Harry got down on his hands and knees and reached towards it. Ouch! The book snapped shut on his hand and then flapped past him, still skittering on his covers. Harry scrambled around, threw himself forward, and managed to flatten it. Uncle Vernon gave a loud, sleepy grunt from the room next door. Hedwig and Whirl interestedly as Harry clanked his struggling book tightly in his arms, hurried to his chest of drawers, and pulled out a belt as he buckled tightly around it. The monster book shuddered angrily, but could no longer flap and snap, so Harry threw it on the bed and reached for Hagrid's card. Dear Harry, happy birthday! Think you might find this useful the next year? Won't say no more here. Tell you when I see you. Hope the muggle's treating you right. All the best, Hagrid. It struck Harry's ominous that Hagrid thought a biting look would come in useful, but he put up Hagrid's card next to Ron and Hermione's, grinning more broadly than ever. Now there was only the letter from Hogwarts left. Noticing that it was rather thicker than usual, Harry scraped open the envelope, pulled out the first page of parchment written, and read, Dear Mr. Potter, please note that the new school year will be begun on September the 1st. The Hogwarts Express will leave from King's Cross Station, flat for 9 3/4 at 11 o'clock. Third years are permitted to visit here the village of Hogsmeade at certain weekends. Please give enclosed permission form to your parent or guardian to sign. A list of books for next year is enclosed. Yours sincerely, Professor M. McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Harry pulled out the Hogsmeade information form and looked at it, no longer grinning. It would be wonderful to visit Hogwarts in that weekend. He knew it was an entirely wizarding village, and he had never set foot there. But how on earth he was going to persuade Uncle Vernon or Aunt Petunia to sign the form? He looked over at the alarm clock. It was now 2 o'clock in the morning. Deciding the validity of Hogsmeade's form when he woke up, Harry got back into bed and reached up to cross off another day on the tentative make it himself, counting down the days left until his return for Hogwarts. Then he took off his glasses and lay down, eyes open, facing his tree's backyards. Extremely unusual though he was, at that moment Harry Potter felt just like everyone else, glad, for the first time in his life, that it was his birthday. 오늘 해리포터 3권 챕터 1이었어요. 챕터 2에서 만나요. 안녕!